Tinaxam, Lutke, Salish, Kamench Wilatia, Ukachtemten, Nekatix Chuish and Puises.
In the Rocky Mountains of Montana, the winters are hard and long. When the moon glows cold and snow blankets the ground, the peoples who have lived here for millennia gather together.
After it snows and when you know all the hibernating animals go back to bed, that's when the stories come out. And of course our Indians didn't have months, so my grandma used to say, then you can tell the stories. And that's when the trees that soak up a lot of water, when it gets so cold that they break, then you can start telling the coyote stories.
We'd all sit around on the floor, and the elders would get up and start telling stories. Coyote was stuck up there and he was sweating. The fox ate all the food, most of the food. He was still full. The bighorn was challenging anybody to come over, and fight. Oh, his belly started getting bigger. Oh, I personally was just laying there. He couldn't hardly move,
The story that my mother told me was that a long time ago that the tribe was at that point where there just wasn't enough game and their winter stores of food were being used up, and they were very hungry on the verge of starvation. So there was a grandmother who was getting very concerned about this lack of food because the hunters weren't finding the game. There wasn't enough fish to go around for everyone, and she had made the last of her food that she had for her family, and she went out and went to the hills by herself, and she was praying, having a conversation with the Creator and about what can she do, what is she going to do, and asking for benevolence, for something to come so that her family doesn't starve to death. She took her hair down, and her hair was gray. She was a very old woman, and sat on the hillsides, and she was sitting there weeping and moaning, and her tears bounced down her hair that was flowing down the front of her dress, and her tears, they would splash.
And the tears went in the ground, and that formed the bitterroot. That's where the bitterroot come from. And that's why the old Indians used to say, it has to be a woman to pray for the bitterroot.
Part of the story had something to do with the red-winged blackbird. The colors of the flower somehow came from the red-winged blackbird, and some of the sheen that's on the plant also was the gray from her hair. She was given the bitterroot as a gift for the people to survive. For the beginning of time for the Salish people, the Salish peoples are the indigenous people in the northwest part of the United States. Bitterroot has been one of the major staples.
It's good for the heart, they say. It's good medicine for the heart. But that has to be your diet, that has to be your strict diet. And the people a long time ago had good health.
The way the Salish believe is that very first root and the prayers that are said and the respect that everyone should have will determine what kind of year that we'll have, so that we'll have plenty. And it represents not only just plenty of bitterroot, but it also determines plenty for the roots and the berries and the teas and the medicines, everything from the natural world. And so it's a very significant, prayerful time. Elder women watch the bitterroot, and they go out and they make visits to it, and they check. And when it gets to the point that it's ready, they determine it's ready, and then it's announced.
Okay, the word is spetlam. The word for bitterroot, spetlam. And then they have the digger, what they call the petse.
People knew where certain areas had a lot of bitterroot, or the roots were very large, or maybe not as bitter tasting, or depending on what they liked.
This bitterroot here in the Bitterroot Valley was the most bitter of the bitterroot, the strongest. Some are just mild, and they liked this one.
The Creator gave another gift to the Salish, a gift in the form of a great beast which would provide food and warmth for the people. It could be found in the lands from where the sun rises.
And they had 2 buffalo hunts. The one in the summer was called a swikltse, and then the one in in the winter time was the Louie. They had the 2 hunts. So the one in the summer was mainly for the provisions for the winter, you know, your food and your hides for the teepees and things like that. And your wintertime hunters that went out was just mainly to get the prime robes for the blankets.
In the late summer of 1805, the Salish and their friends gathered together to begin the annual journey to the buffalo hunting grounds. From their encampment, they were astonished to see a peculiar group of strangers heading their way, strangers whose arrival would portend vast changes in their way of life.